It's really kind of all.
Okay, well, welcome.
It does. Come all you faithful. We are. You're joyful and. Good for you. I'm glad. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been stuck.
So we got our video going there. Ready? Okay. Welcome. I'm honored to be here. Last month, Jake talked about icebergs and getting beneath the surface and building deep relationships. And to do that required one thing. Who can remember what that was? One word. You have to make it safe. And that's the premise of our conversation today about crucial conversations, that we need to make them safe. So I've given you a piece of paper and a pen, and at the end I want you to talk to one partner and talk about what your takeaway is, what you're going to remember from this. I'm passionate about this because this is what makes careers, and this is what makes healthy relationships. Those who are most successful with crucial conversations are the most influential in your organization. I'll read a story about this so you kind of get an understanding of it. So I want you to capture a few things that can be a handle for you, and that's what I put over here. Here's a few things about what we want. We need to make it safe. We start with the facts. We tell our story, and we'll keep on going and go through some of those details for you. So those are little tantalizers to get us going. Our time is short, so I'm going to have to move rather rapidly through this. There's a law of crucial conversations. Chronic relationship problems are a result of not holding the crucial conversation or doing it poorly. That's why we have chronic relationship problems. How many of us want to stay in misery and like, oh, I dread having to talk to that person about their body odor? You can't stand the odor, but you're really too afraid to talk to them, right? We can solve that, and we're going to show you how to do that today. So, what is a crucial conversation? A crucial conversation is one where the stakes are high. You could lose your job if you offend your boss. You could alienate somebody and not have to live with that relative and go to Christmas every time with them because you alienated them one time. All those things they're crucial. They have consequences. Opinions vary. I believe Reagan's a good president. No, he was a lousy president. Or take religion, you know. We can get real upfront, real quick, can't we, with opinions varying or emotions run strong. Some people get pretty charged about these things, don't they? And you do too once in a while. The emotions start running and like, well, we just started talking about how we're going to paint the house, and then she started saying this, and then I started saying this, and it escalated, right? So we've all been in those situations where we might have said something we regret. Our emotions got engaged in this. So this is the definition of a crucial conversation. So is there any examples in the audience where you've have a crucial conversation you need to get into, or that you have had and maybe it did or didn't go so well? A quick 10-second, 15-second example?
Well, I just had one this past week. We've got a HR lady that we've got about 130 employees about that, and probably 129 stay away from her. If you look at World War II films about a woman in a Nazi uniform.
Her name's Helga?
And I can't go into the whole story, but I was asking for something that my supervisor okayed, but HR declined. And I was in a meeting a month ago, and she accused me of getting preferential treatment by my former bosses. And that really got me. And as I asked her about that, she says, "Don't you dare bring up anything in the past." And I says, well, these former bosses that I had didn't think this was an issue. And I can't go into everything, but anyway, I had the second meeting this past week. And I first had the attitude, I wanted to nail this lady. I had the facts from the company manual. She was wrong. But going through this, that we've gone through this before, how am I going to handle this? I wasn't going to achieve anything. I did get declined again, so I have to, it's gonna cost me money, I have to change some things. But it was one of those conversations, I got to say my piece with a non-threatening way, and I walked out of there very peaceful, and I could tell she was peaceful. She wasn't this, we've seen this lady before. So, just for myself, when, emotions, my emotions were running real strong before that. And so, anyway, there's a lot more to it, but.
You took a step and intervened that broke this control cycle that ends up with a bad result. We'll take a look at that. That's a great story. Paul, did you have one maybe, or?
I think Star Wars episodes 4 through 6 are the best. I had that conversation this past week. I'm kidding. You know what I'm saying?
It's very.
Emotions do run strong.
So those are some quick examples. We're going to keep moving on. So why do we avoid these conversations? Have we all had one where something is bugging us, the neighbor's being noisy or irritating, but we just have never gone over to the neighbor and confronted it and dealt with it and got rid of it, and so we could have a peaceful thing? So we avoid them because we fear making it worse. And we have three choices. We can avoid it and don't deal with it, stay miserable. We can approach it and do it poorly and better the consequences, or we can do it well. And that's what I want to give you today, is a few tips of how can we handle those conversations well. So the solution is dialogue. And the definition of dialogue is a free flow of meaning between people. So there's a free flow in here. Nobody is holding back their opinion because they're afraid of an authoritarian boss. Nobody's pushing their opinion too hard and trying to force it into the conversation. So there's no clamming up and there's no forcing. So that's kind of a whole continuum that we see here. I'm sorry my pen marker's not working as well as I want. So on one end of this continuum we have clam up, and on the other end we have what they could be yelling, could be hitting. If we go extreme, this is kind of the violence. V-I-O-L-E-N-C-E. Sorry. And on this end is silence. So recognize that these are the reactions we have to some of these conversations. And some people are not contributing, so there's no free flow. And you're not going to resolve it if they're not talking. They're not going to be satisfied at the end of the day if they're not engaged in this conversation. They won't feel like they've felt they've been heard. They won't take ownership of it. So if you're in a meeting, people are down on what they're not up on. If they haven't been included, they're just down on it. They're not up with the rest of the team. So these are things that we need to be sure that there's a free flow of meaning going on. So why do these conversations degenerate into yelling or someone else clamming up or a whole team clamming up? Well, it's basically gets to our motives. People aren't talking because they're trying to save face or avoid getting shot down. Or somebody's gauging pretty hard because they're trying to win. And you should have let it go. It was a minor deal, but you keep pumping on this thing. Or you're trying to punish somebody. Well, you treated me that way, and I'm going to make it hard for you now. So that's why we end up in those three things right there is why we end up in some difficult situations with our conversations. So let me talk about a couple sisters. They went to an amusement park, drank lots of pop with their dad, and came back to the motel room, and they urgently needed to get to the bathroom, right? So they both walk into the bathroom, and then they argue about who's going to go first. Finally, they yell, "Dad!" Dad comes over and says, "Okay, you guys settle it. One rule, no hitting." 25 minutes later, the dad hears the first flush. So these two who had a need for relief saw each other as the problem and got into a motive of winning. Now, how many of you have had to go urgently to the bathroom, but somehow found a way to hold it off for another 25 minutes? This is what our motives do to us on this type of thing. And so we need to find a way to break that off. and not have that happen to us. So we need to ask ourselves a question at that point. Now there's another thing that's going on. We get in these crucial conversations because they're a surprise to us, and we hadn't expected a neighbor to come over and start yelling at us. Or we've never seen it modeled well, how to handle a difficult conversation. Went home, we just yelled. Or people clammed up and it was just an icy thing all day long around the house, right? You've never, how do you do this stuff? Nobody's ever shown you. Or the other thing that's happening in most of these, you start feeling tense, the adrenaline starts flowing, the blood starts going down to your muscles for fight or flight. And now you're trying to get into an intellectual judo with half a brain. This is not going to go well. You got to think pretty hard on some of these answers, right? And you're doing this with half a brain. So this is why we fail at some of these conversations. And we need to break that, and we need to ask ourselves, what do I want? That will engage our brain, and that will start sending blood back up to our head. So we can start thinking. So it's kind of an interrupt to the jousting that we're doing, and we're going so fast, bang, 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 bang. Okay, what do I want? Now these girls could have asked that question. But let me give you another story that's kind of similar to it. Husband and wife, husband comes home, he's tired, he says, I'm really tired today, I just want to sit and watch TV. And the wife says, oh, I was hoping we could be together and go out to a movie tonight. So they start going back and forth. I want my way, and it's starting to escalate. Voices are starting to raise. So safety is starting to disappear, right? Getting to be a little tense. Now, how do we get it back on track for them? This is where what he wanted to do was he wanted to watch TV. And she wanted to go out to a movie. Do we see, those are kind of mutually exclusive, is that right? So what we need to do at this point is to create a mutual purpose that we can de-escalate. So to do that, we need to step out of the conversation and come down here. And what it was he said he wanted to do, yes, TV, but what else was it? Relax. He wanted to relax. And she said that she wanted to go to a movie because she wanted to be together. So he might slow the conversation down and say, now, why was it that you wanted to go to a movie? Well, I just wanted to spend time together. And she asked him, well, no, why was it you wanted to watch TV? Oh, I wanted to relax. Do you think we can find a mutual purpose where we could relax and be together at the same time? They had to step out of the content of the conversation and come down to here into the conditions of the conversation. Is it safe? And then once you achieve some mutual purpose, I'll just put purpose here for you, but mutual purpose. We're going to talk about mutual respect in a second. And we come back up into the content of the conversation, which was TV and movie. Step out of the content. What did you want to do? Why did you want to? What was your purpose? What do I want for me? What do I want for others? What do I want for our relationship? This brings blood back to our brain, slows down the conversation, establishes safety. Oh, now I guess we can talk about this. So think about that. I'm having to skip a little bit, so I'm needing to pause just a second and answer the question of why do conversations degenerate and end up going to some bad motives? Well, you've heard it said that either we act on our emotions or our emotions will act on us. control your emotions or they will control us. And we get into very charged atmospheres. So Doug, if you would come, and he and I are going to do a little skit for you. And the situation is this. Bob, the husband, is arriving home. And I, Carol, look upset. And I've been crying. I can't believe you're doing this to me.
Doing what?
You know what I'm talking about.
Did I forget? I don't know what you're talking about.
You're having an affair and I have proof right here.
What would be on that paper that would prove that I was having an affair?
It's a bill from the motel, you jerk. You go to a motel room with some woman, and you put it on our credit card. I can't believe you're doing this to me. Cut. You've seen this before. Okay. So, I'm skipping some stuff, but we're going to get to the meat of this, okay? So go with me. Normally we talk about what we think will lead to how we feel, and that will, she's betrayed, we're going to act on it, and we're going to accuse, right? Now, to break this cycle and make it safe, what happens is this has not been pulled apart enough. And if we pull this part a little bit more, then we're going to be able to get a break in these conversations and tell useful stories. So what happens is we started with a fact. Let's see if I can get a brighter pen. And that fact led us to wrap a story around it. She had a receipt, so she started thinking what this meant. And oh, well, motel room. Nearby. Oh, an affair, right? So she added meaning, and she made a judgment to that. Which then, betrayal, she had a feeling over here, so she would have felt betrayed. And then she started to accuse. Is that two C's?
Yes.
Yep. Hard doing this up here. Anyway, so to break this cycle of where we come in and we accuse, we need to change our story. So we started out with one fact with a receipt, but there was other things that could have been interpretations, right? So we know that from the fact that meant that there was a room involved, and in the room there could have been a woman. And so that's the story she selected and raced down the street with it. Now there could have been another story. It could have been a room and a business meeting, and he paid the rental for the business room, and that would not have triggered up a lot of charged emotions, right? So everything from hereafter would have been okay. You want to know the truth of this story? The two of them had gone to a local restaurant, paid for the meal, and the owner happens to own a motel and a restaurant with one merchant account. So when you slide your card, it always says you were at the motel. So poor Bob, she's jumping down his throat because what did she do? She wrapped a story around this room thing, and it wasn't a room at all, but she didn't know that at the time. So when we get fired up and engaged in a conversation, realize that when we start these crucial conversations, we start over in this area where we have made a conclusion. And so when we start our conversation with our colleagues, our family, whoever it may be, we start the story here, and they're wondering what in the world happened. How did this come about? Bob was pretty Huh? Doug, you did a great job. Okay, so let's see what I can also slip in here before we give you a little assignment. So what we need to do in this whole deal is to, see if I can get blue, which seems to be writing better, is we have to make it safe. This is the what we need to do. We step out of the content and find mutual purpose. Stop what you're talking about. I'll give you a quick example. My wife and I were driving to church last Sunday, and she said that she wanted several more lighters for candles in the house, and so I said, well, we already have one. And she said, well, I just convenient, and I kind of like to have some. Multiples. It says, but you can only use one at a time. But she says, well, but I just say it would be nice. And I say, well, where are we going to store them? It's clutter. We got too much jammed up around here already. And then I said, oh, oops. Okay. I did stop, and we got to church mostly okay. But I went home, and I admitted to her that my motive had changed from convenience to winning, to convincing her this was illogical. We are building a language in our home that, hey, could we talk about this further? Just whatever the quick little phrase is, I'm going to give you a few more in just a second, that you can use that will help people step out of the content and get down into finding a mutual purpose. Well, we want it, the candle lighting to be convenient. Okay, let's figure that out. What ways could this be convenient? So we start with the facts. These are the tools that you can take home with you on your piece of paper. How do we avoid plunging into a conversation and making it troublesome? Stay away from the conclusions. Stay with the facts. All I have is a receipt. I don't know the rest of the story. Don't wrap that entire scenario around that thing. And so what we do is we tell our story, and then we ask the other person to tell their story. How did they come to their thinking and their view on it, and how do we do that? We do it tentatively. Well, the way I was seeing it, I thought it was like this. What did you see? You're not coming to a tight conclusion. And we encourage asking them what those might be. Let me give you a few of those quick phrases. If we're speaking tentatively, here's a good one. I was wondering why. That you don't get all defensive, right, when you hear something like that. Like, well, we're seeking to understand. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. You'll hear from the 7 Habits type material. Perhaps you were unaware. And then we take it from there. That's tentatively. And we want to avoid being wimpy on this. Don't go too weak on this, like say, oh, call me crazy, but no. Fess up, to go take it head on. I was wondering why. I know this is probably not true, another wimpy one. I know this is probably untrue. No, don't go that route. You're not going to get to resolution that you really want. It doesn't feel safe completely yet. So, encourage testing. Maybe you're in a group meeting, and it's not going well, the conversation in that team meeting. You might say, does anyone see it differently? So you're inviting them to, you've been pushing hard, you're the boss, and you're inviting people to come into the conversation. You might say, what am I missing here? And if people are really reluctant, you can do some priming, which is, what problems could you see with this decision? So, watching my clock, and let me read one story that illustrates it in a group setting. We've been talking a lot about groups, or individuals. Let's talk about groups. So I'll just read it rapidly. Kevin, his peers, and their boss were deciding on a new location for their offices. Would they move across town, across state, or across the country? The first 2 execs presented their arguments for their top choices, and as expected, their points were greeted with penetrating questions. from the full team. No vague claim went unclarified. No unsupported reasoning went unquestioned. Then Chris, the CEO, pitched his preference, one that was both unpopular and potentially disastrous. However, when people tried to disagree or push back on Chris, he responded poorly. Since he was the big boss, he didn't exactly have to browbeat people to get what he wanted. Instead, he became slightly defensive. First he raised an eyebrow, then he raised a finger, and then he raised his voice a little. It wasn't long until people stopped questioning him, and Chris's inadequate proposal was quietly accepted. Well, almost. That's when Kevin spoke up. His words were simple enough. Something like, "Hey, Chris, can I check something out with you?" The reaction was stunning. Everyone in the room just stopped breathing. But Kevin ignored the apparent terror of his colleagues and plunged on ahead. In the next few minutes, he in essence told the CEO that he appeared to be violating his own decision-making guidelines. He was subtly using his power to move the offices to his hometown. Kevin continued to explain what he saw happening, and when he finished the first minutes of his delicate exchange, Chris was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded his head.